This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Well, wonderful. I certainly do appreciate you both jumping on today and taking a little bit of time to discuss this topic of strategic partnerships within business and within business settings. And it's one that I have, throughout my professional career, I've entered into quite a few partnerships. I've seen some of those be successful, and I've seen some of those fail. And so, this is a really good opportunity for me to, really ponder and dig deep as to, why I've been able to be successful in some of the partnerships and why I failed in some of the partnerships. So what I'd really like to do today as well is, open it up to questions and, have some open dialogue regarding this. Rich, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, what you do for professionally, and a little bit about what you'd like to achieve by tuning into this class?
Yes, thanks, Rich Hallman. I'm with the company Mobidyne, and I'm a retired Air Force pilot and have a startup in which I've been working on it for over a decade, a type of air vehicle that has a lot of moving parts, literally and figuratively. And so it takes a lot of putting together a team of teams and working with some local labs along the Wasatch Front, as well as some other small companies, as well as with potentially some major aerospace companies. We have an Air Force contract state phase 1, they call it, and we're working to transition it to phase 2, in which the more significant funding for building the prototype. So right now I'm forming the team, and it's all about strategic partnerships. So I really appreciate this topic. I look forward to your insights.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And it sounds like a very exciting project, and I'm sure one that requires a lot of your time and energy, I'm sure.
It does.
Well, good. Well, thank you for tuning in, Rich. What about you, Mr. Bishop?
So I've I've been in the energy industry. I've been in real estate. I've been done a lot over the past number of years, and really helping out with the Believe organization and developing all that, and doing the government relations. And I have experience in larger partnerships, but also very smaller ones for smaller ventures. And I've also seen, like you mentioned, pros and cons to both sides, but I definitely is a side of business that I would like to hone in better, know what to do, so that not just for me, but for anyone I might get in, become a partner with, so that's fair on both sides. And so, but I'm excited about what we're going to be going over today.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've started a handful of businesses. I've had opportunity to sell one of my businesses and go to work for one of our larger clients, and spent about 6 years with a mid-sized manufacturing company. And I've been able to see, even from a startup standpoint, Rich, where you're at, and you're growing this, and you've got a great idea, and you're going to rely heavily on partnerships. I've been able to see how critical those are during the phase that you're at. And so, when I speak to these points again, I think it's offered me a good opportunity to reflect on the failures and the successes. So get started here, and I hope you both can see my screen. So I start with, turtle on a fence post, right? And this quote here I like: "There is no such thing as a self-made man or woman. You will reach your goals only with the help of others." And I've definitely, I found that to be true. And, I think the way that we look at, how you perceive what a strategic partnership is, the majority of us see it as something, from kind of a business to business, we're entering into something and we share the same purpose or same common goals. But I also think it can be related to the team that you're pulling in. And some of it may be an employee, it may be subcontractors you're getting involved in. And I think for me, I've been in that position where I've maybe been a little bit too proud and maybe prideful just to say, hey, look, I can do this on my own and I really don't need everyone's help. And I've had those feelings, I think, when the strategic partnerships or the partnerships have been at a crossroad, maybe a difficult time where we're facing failure or there's challenges or issues with the business or a business endeavor that we're pursuing. I've definitely caught myself over the years saying, boy, I don't need to be working with anyone. I can just do it on my own. So, I quickly am reminded that the turtle can't get on a fence post by himself, right? So I would just encourage all of us really to keep that in mind, right? That during those adverse times when the storms kick in, we'll have a tendency just to reflect and question, why we're doing what we're doing with these particular partners. And I think that those, again, those emotions are going to set in, but I think it's important to remember why you entered into that partnership to begin with, right? And just keeping perspective. So again, we can do a lot more with a team. The next thing, if you would, Elias, could you read the first point up here?
Get your house in order. A strategic partnership isn't a remedy for problems in your business. On the contrary, it will bring them to light.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that? As you read that and reflect on that a little bit.
Well, I think there are key things in any business or organization that if you're not doing things right, it's kind of like I don't know, if you're not, it's almost a partnership's kind of like a marriage, I guess you can say, a business marriage, so to speak. And so I think, if I get married, is my wife gonna fix me? No, there are some things that I need to do as an individual that I need to be doing well before she even comes in the picture. And I think it's similar with any business or organization where there are some key things, and that if we aren't doing those things, when we do bring in someone else, those things that we haven't remedied or fixed or improved, they're just going to be brought to light more, because that partner will be wondering, what in the world is this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great point, right? I kind of related it as to, when you're courting, your spouse, right? Or you're going out on a first date, or even a second or third or fourth, we tend to present our very best, right? We show up in a clean car, we show up, ready to impress, take them to a nice restaurant, high energy, figure out those things that we should say so that, we can ultimately make this person fall in love with us and live happily ever after. And I think for those of us that have been in a long-term relationship, I think we realize that that'll quickly wear off. That's not something that can be maintained, and ultimately all of our, maybe the best way to say it is, those things that we don't have in order will start to quickly come to light. So I think it's very important. I'm not saying or suggesting that you have to have a complete business plan in place and you have to have this mature business that's been around for 25 years and you've got all your processes documented and outlined and you're a billion-dollar company before you can enter into a strategic partnership. I think the key with this is entering into it with being honest, right? So if there are things that you're working on as a company, Maybe, hey, look, we don't have the greatest processes, or hey, look, this is a venture that we're pursuing. We're waiting on some funding from the government or whatever it may be. And I just have to be open with you that things are going to be a little rocky for the next 6 months. And I think as long as, we're being open and honest in our communication and letting them know that, hey, this is where we're currently at, rather than painting a picture that's not. And again, it will quickly be brought to light if your house isn't in order within a partnership. Going to the next point, it's determining your goals. I think that's one of the things, I'm big on, charting out the pros and cons to anything that I do. I think that helps me just, really break it down and be very constructive with it. With partnerships, you really have to ask yourself, what is it you're wanting to accomplish, right? If you're going to enter into one, what are the goals for it? And just like any good goals, right, they have to be realistic. We have to, hold ourselves and hold others accountable for those goals. And I think a big thing as well is, learn from the failures, learn from the shortcomings. And what a lot of people forget to do is celebrate the successes. And again, with this process of goals, in the beginning, it's very exciting, right? You're getting together, you're meeting, potentially meeting families, you're doing restaurants, life is good. We're gonna take over the world. And then quickly, once all of that, the newness wears off, things change. And I think it's just important to set some sort of a, metric up to be able to review the goals and make sure you're staying on track. I think the next one, right, identify potential strategic partners. Look for partners that only have what you need, but also, share your same core values. I think that's an important thing. You definitely want to, go in with your eyes wide open, and and I like the word, your core values. What are the things that are important to you? And with these, right, all of us have, differences in, whether it be cultures or religions, or maybe just overall we're in different places in our lives. Some of us could be happily married, some of us could have been divorced, some of us could have no kids, and some of us could have 6 kids. And, I think that it's important to understand where everyone is at. And that'll definitely affect the outcome of the partnership. I think if you go into it, again, with the understanding and looking at those core values and what's important, and having identified those prior to signing anything, your likelihood for success will be a lot greater. The next one is do your due diligence, right? Figure out who you're partnering with. And again, I think that there is value in, searching out, and you can ask for referrals. You could, obviously the internet, there's a lot of information that's made public. But I'm a big proponent of, not necessarily judging a book by its cover, right? I think it's really important that we sit down with these companies or individuals and understand who they are and what's important to them, and to not be afraid to ask the tough questions. And, oftentimes I even see it in business, and I've been guilty of it, right? You'll jump on Glassdoor and you'll read about a company that you're going to potentially be working with, and there's 20 posts on there from disgruntled employees. And again, I think that there's always 2 sides to every story. And I think if and I've even asked, I've come across things that are a little bit alarming, and I've even asked. And with that, the responses have really helped me understand whether they admit to fault, take responsibility for it, or defend their position. I think that's just, again, part of doing your due diligence. The next thing is get to know each other. Why do you think this is important, Rich?
Yeah, I'm doing some chats there as well as we're going.
Okay, great.
Yes, sure. It's a process of mutual discovery, so requires all the things you're talking about. I wanted to ask you, what have you found to be some typical differences in core values? as I think about it, typically you're talking to someone, it's pretty uncommon that I've seen that the basics of integrity and hard work and such are pretty common. But what examples have you encountered of differences in core values from yourself?
No, that's a really good question. I think that, and what I've found, right, when you're at that phase of, the due diligence, and you come out and ask somebody, do you stand for integrity? Are you honest? Are these, usually everyone's answer is yes, yes, and yes. And so for me, that's kind of just a real good, that's a surface question. I like to even ask, what have been some of the most difficult things you've encountered or dealt with within business? Sometimes whether it's, and usually those type of questions will lead to other questions. And so, for example, for me, if you're talking about, I lived in Houston during Hurricane Harvey. And the company that I was working for, we were an ESOP, so we were an employee-owned company, and we were new into the Houston market, so our employee versus temporary labor we were probably 80% temporary labor, and we were probably 20% employees. And for me, when I went in and I worked with the company and the executives, I was able to see a lot of things that really to me meant that they were honest and there was a lot of integrity. And I'm not necessarily going to make, I'm not going to say what was right or wrong, but I could see as general manager of that facility, when Hurricane Harvey hit, there was decisions to be made, right? Because we were delayed, the factory was shut down for 3 or 4 weeks. There were questions asked, so should our employees be paid, right, during this downtime that they can't work? And then the other question was, should the temporary employees be paid? And, by all means, the expectation of the company was when the factory opened back up that not only the employees showed up, but the temporary employees showed up. So again, without really telling you what occurred or what ended up happening, for me, that was an opportunity for me to see, and I had determined how I and what I stood for in that certain situation. And, however that decision panned out, for me, that's a difference in a core value. And I hope that makes sense. But that was a good example. And it's hard to drill down into those questions, but I would definitely think about, asking those tough questions and, trying to really get outside of those just surface questions that, everyone just says yes to. So I hope that makes sense and can provide some value for you there, Rich, as you look to identify core values.
I can see the process, but I'm still, I guess, at least agnostic or skeptical of what clear differences in core values one would discover in such a process. Because even in that situation you mentioned, there's what you would like to do, like pay those when you're down, but whether you have the actual resources or not to do it may or may not reflect what what your core value is.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's a really good point, right? And as far as your core values, and I think for me, it's if you're going to enter into a partnership, is what happens if there's no money to make payroll, and let's just say that there's enough money to pay you and to pay your strategic partner, but there's not enough money to pay your employees. What decision do you make in that situation? Right? If your backs are up against a wall and there's, whether it's somebody's in need or there's a, tremendous challenge or some sort of an emergency, where are you guys going to meet? And I've been able to see this. I've developed some of the best friendships of my life with the people through these partnerships. And I've been able to see, even when my back has been against the wall, it wasn't just talk in the very beginning, right? They've been supported when my family, when there's been difficulties or whatever it may be. And for me, those are the values that I look for. right? Somebody that is going to be there when the tables turn and things get difficult. And again, I think it's really difficult to identify those in the beginning, but I think with good questions and asking about maybe different instances along the way, that could provide some help there.
I like that a lot. Having, in fact, if that's say a list or something, you have discovery scenarios like that, because it's not something you can simply ask yes, no, fill in the blank. It's very much scenario or situation based where you discover that. Even in your own values, you might think, yeah, I know what my values are, but until you get those kind of situations, it's like now you really gotta have them match your choices.
Absolutely. And so, it is a tough thing to do, but I think asking those questions, and it can just be your position on, maybe it's different things that are going on in the world, right? It can be small talk, and then you can kind of read between the lines, and maybe they don't share similar values on the way they view things, right? And again, with all the unrest and the turmoil, whether with COVID, or you could look at everything that's going on with the protesting and things, we each are entitled to our own opinions, our own stances, our own beliefs. But that's a really good way to say, okay, well, look, I see it this way, this particular sees it this way. Is that something that I'm comfortable, and it's most likely going to translate into other areas within the partnership? So I hope that helps. Another, typical hard due diligence questions. I think we've kind of surfaced on that and talked about it, Rich, but again, I would be happy to even jump on a call with you at some time after, or do whatever I could to try to support you, and because you are at such a critical juncture where you're having to form partnerships with not just one, but with many.
Yeah, and it's not just about having same core values. It's about, there may be an intentional value to diversity of values or diversity of perspectives. So
Absolutely. And and then I've been able to see firsthand, I mean, people are at a little bit different places in life. If I'm, even from a financial standpoint, right? What are their motives? Are they just looking to get in and get rich quick? Are they looking to get in and and put in the work and ultimately see a big return? With your particular instance, it seems like there's a tremendous amount of upside. And I think it's important that, I mean, you're the founder, it's your idea, this has been your baby, but I think it's important to ask people, what they would like to see in the future, what's important to them. Some people just want to be a part of a team. Some people just want to be heard, right? Some people are looking, I need to be making $1 million a year. I'm not going to be happy. So just a few ideas, or, maybe a few perspective there. So the next one here, Elias, can you read this one? Make it a win-win.
See, make it a win-win. Making it a win-win is essential, even if you think you can leverage the deal more in your favor.
Why might that be important?
I think trust, and really what's ethical, what's right, especially when it comes to a partnership. Trust is very important. They can see if you're trying to leverage or try to squeeze out as much as possible in your favor, or if you really genuinely care about their interests as well. And when they see that you're really about the win-win, and you're really concerned about fairness and concerned about their interests as well, then I really think it helps set a precedence, even if they might be inclined to leverage you out. I think it would help them. No, we're going to do win-win. When they're put in that situation, I think they'd be more inclined to do a win-win and watch out for your interests as well. And I honestly, I just think it's the right thing to do, you know, especially if it's a partnership.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And I think it's understanding, right, setting expectations and setting realistic expectations for the partnership. And I've been very fortunate when in my life when I've seen when I put the other's best interest at heart, right, and I keep that at the forefront at all times. Usually the likelihood for success is a lot greater. But when I put my own interest ahead of the other, then usually the outcome hasn't been too positive. So, I think just looking at it and trying to be fair, but also understanding that, it's setting expectations, and you really can't control the way people think, right? You can't control the things that happen in people's lives. And I've been able to see this within partnerships. You get to know these people, you get to working with them day in and day out, and you can see their temperament, right? Whether they had a really good weekend and they've got a very stable, let's say a marriage, right? You can see those good and bad days, and it affects their decision making, and it affects, the way they handle things, and the way that they may view what a win-win is could change from day to day. So I think it's just being at peace with yourself and understanding, hey, look, I've got my partner's best interest at heart. So at the end of the day, whatever that is and whatever that means to you, whether it succeeds or fails, you can definitely hold your head high. The next point here is very important. Make it official. One of the things that I've had to learn the hard way is, even with my grandfather and my father, they both, they're both entrepreneurs. They both have been able to build businesses and have sold and acquired companies. And, the days of just a handshake agreement, right, or a handshake understanding, unfortunately don't exist. And, back then, even my grandfather tells me a story, like my word was my bond, right? When I told somebody I was going to do it, I was going to do it. And, I don't want to be quick to pass judgment, but unfortunately we live in a society, and I think generationally, unless it's written out in a contract and it's very clear and, everything is laid out, it's very hard to uphold. And so, just keep that in mind. I'm one that I try to live by. The philosophy is I trust until I can't until I can't trust anymore. It's just kind of the way that I've decided to live and, view my business and my business partnerships. But I definitely highly recommend, whether you're going into business with a family member or even with your father, or you're going into a business with a complete stranger, just make sure that you take the time to, to jot out your ideas and the terms and the expectations. And it doesn't necessarily need to even be, something super formal. I think the attorneys would obviously disagree with that, but I think just having a document that you can both sign, if you can't afford an attorney to help you, will at least give you some clarity on the partnership. And then the last point here is keep the lines of communication open. So this has been one of the areas that I've probably failed most in. And of recent, I work with a lot of different companies, subcontractors, and ultimately what I've been able to witness is we agree to something, we put something in writing, and either on our part or on their part, one of us ends up pulling more weight than the other, right? We stipulate, for example, if it's a service arrangement or a working arrangement, and we outline, hey, these are the 10 things that our company is going to do, and these are the 10 things that your company is going to do. What we end up seeing is they maybe do 2 of the points that they agreed to, and then we take on the additional 8. And although I would like people to, keep their word and honor their agreement, what I found is me picking up the slack and compensating for them not doing those. I'm not being honest, right? I'm not being honest with the company or the individuals that I partnered with. So I think it's being able to take that inventory, take a step back and say, hey, this is what we agreed to, and this is what this particular project or opportunity, or this is what this has become. What can we do to realign? What can we do to make sure that we're on the same page? Because it definitely, in this current situation, right, that it's very real right now for me, it causes a lot of stress. And it's one of those where you kind of walk away and say, hey, I don't need to be in partnerships anymore. I end up doing it all anyways. And I know that's not the right attitude. But if I'm being real with everyone on the call, it's what happens. So again, making sure that you're keeping that communication open and that you're not putting off, or prolonging those difficult conversations to get things back on track. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. Elias, can you read this?
Relationships are built over time. The dots only connect behind us. They do not connect in front of us. We may not know yet why things happen. Dieter F. Uchtdorf.
Okay. So why do you think this is important to realize that, relationships aren't built overnight?
Yeah, that's sobering because like so much what you're saying is about establishing expectations and definitions, and I can picture an agreement where you get scope creep or situations beyond the parties' controls, and there's been an expectation of what you will do, but what happens if you're unable to do it? What's the backup compensating deliverable? So yeah, that's actually quite sobering. Also, the dots connect behind us. That's really quite profound.
It certainly is. And, I don't think that it's something that, and I even just applying it to myself, I don't think it's something we need to be afraid of new relationships and being open to, meeting new people and networking. And, some of the most successful people I know, they're master networkers, right? They know they're not afraid to talk to people and approach people, and they're always open to, forming and creating new relationships. But I think the key is just understanding that successful relationships are in fact built over time. And I think those closest relationships that I have, whether it be personal or business, it doesn't, I don't think there's a time limit that is set, or, it's saying, hey, look, in order for me to have a good relationship with this individual, 12 months and, and 2 hours have to go by. I think you can kind of set benchmarks and you can kind of see these different individuals. And I've had people that have come into my life in the matter of 2 months. These are some of the closest of my friends. And I've had people that have been a part of my life for 20 plus years that you're tried and tested, right? So I think it's, you get in and you have a way of viewing these things, and hopefully we're also, good partners to those that we partner with. So just understand that it will take time, and just like anything worthwhile, it definitely requires effort.
You opened your conversation with mentioning that you had failures and successes in partnerships. And it wouldn't surprise me if those failures or successes are not all directly connected to how well you did or did not follow all these points you're making, that sometimes they just don't work, and you might look back and say, why didn't it work? And it might be just the reality of it.
Now, that's such a good point, Rich. And I think, being able to have that discipline and that understanding of just knowing, hey, look, we're just not a good fit, right? It's just, we're going in different directions. We see things different. Things have changed. And I think the wonderful thing is to be able to recognize that and then act on it. And I think all too often, right, I've been guilty of where I just carry on a partnership just out of fear of failure, right? And just understanding, hey, look, there's just not a lot we can do to fix this. And so thank you so much for bringing that. That's a really good point. The next slide here, it just says, don't be a hero, right? Surround yourself with talent. Rather than focus on improving your weaknesses, focus on your strengths and surround yourself with people who are good at what you're not. And, this one requires definitely some humility, right? This one requires really taking a look at the mirror and saying, okay, what are my strengths? And, I think it's understanding, what some of your weaknesses are, or maybe some of the things that you don't necessarily enjoy about business. And I think looking and, seeking those individuals or those partnerships where they can maybe take on some of those things that are maybe not a strength of ours. And understanding, right, look, I'm just really not good with the financial side of things, right? I understand I'm going to be conservative. I'm not going to go overspend or spend money that we don't have, but maybe just balancing the books or preparing for taxes or keeping a P&L updated or a balance sheet. Maybe those aren't things that you enjoy. Or, maybe it's the, seeking insurance or the sales process. Maybe you're a visionary, maybe you're an inventor, and that's where you want to stay, and you want to stay focused rather than being the general manager of your company and wearing 15 different hats. So again, I think everybody's current situations are different or very unique. Sometimes being an entrepreneur, you have to wear multiple hats, but I think the quicker we can realize that focusing on what we really want to be doing, focusing on what we're good at, and bringing on other people that are strong in those areas where we may be weak or really don't have a lot of desire to carry out.
Yeah, I really like this one. And I appreciate that you mentioned that you really need to be humble and honest. You have to be honest to be able to look at the things that you are good at. Because there's plenty of people out there who think they're good at something but aren't. So maybe invite somebody else to be honest with you, so you can. So, yeah. But I
deal with a few. No, absolutely. I work with a few subcontractors, and they're some of the brightest people I know, and very capable individuals. And one of the things that I always am, even when I work with them or I speak with them about a project or something we're working on, they're always just so brutally honest with me, right? I'll say, hey, is this something that, you can take care of? And they'll say, look, I understand this aspect of it, but this aspect, I really don't have any experience with that. But I'm very happy to take it on, Ryan. I'll do the research, I'll put in the time, but I just want to set expectations for you that I do not have experience in this area. And sometimes I joke about it and I'm like, you're always selling yourself short, right? If you can't figure it out, I don't really know anyone that can. But I take a step back and I have to just appreciate the honesty, right? It's not coming from a place where, they don't have confidence in themselves or their abilities. They're just being honest. Right? They're just letting me know exactly where they're at. So thank you for that, Elias. Would you read this next quote?
Yeah. It is the long history of humankind and animal kind too, that those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. Charles Darwin.
Beautiful, thank you. So I would be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on what it means to collaborate and improvise. What does that represent for you and really in this context?
Well, I think of just thinking of the animal kind too. I think of just my mind went to the tiger, who is the largest of the cats, right? The strongest, hands down, the Siberian tiger, but they hunt solo. It's a solo cat. They're a lone cat. But the king of beasts are the lions, because they hunt in packs. They work together. King of the jungle, so to speak. And so just as a little quick example that Mother Nature's given us, and you can see that the effectiveness of those that hunt in packs or do things in packs or in colony, you see how far more effective that they are, and they make up for each other's weaknesses and capitalize on each other's strengths. All that collaboration is what makes that possible.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And I think as we see these things, and even they have to improvise, right? They have to, who knows what the weather would be like, or, the different things that they encounter, but they work together and they overcome obstacles, right? And I've been able to witness that in my own business, and even from a personal standpoint, that when you can come together and you can have an open line of communication, you can solve any problem, right? If you've got that mindset. So thanks for your thoughts on that.
I also think real quick, it's interesting. What comes to mind too is Abraham Lincoln, because he deliberately put those in his cabinet. Some of them were some of his fiercest opponents, to make sure that he was getting a wider perspective of things that he wouldn't think in and of himself, to be able to, I don't know, to strengthen his viewpoint as a leader. And that is part of what enabled him to lead the way that he did. When a lot of times as leaders, as some just want to get a lot of the people who are just like us, who are gonna say, yeah, you're right on, but we need that collaboration as part of that honest feedback with one another, where you check and balance. You're like, well, what about this? To be able to challenge and to grow as professionals, as businesses, as individuals.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Anything you want to add to that, Rich?
Well, I was thinking about how in the military we like to do what we call red team, where you have blue team, red team. You got the guys that try to project themselves into the opponent perspective, and role play or war game. And I have to think about is Stephen Covey and his whole message of synergy, how it's greater than the sum of the parts.
That's wonderful. Thank you. No, very, very good. I appreciate you both teaching me as well here. So we'll move on to the next slide, and it says clarity and flexibility. It seems obvious that partner companies would strive to find common ground from the start. Yet, in a rush to complete the deal, discussions about common goals often get overlooked. Right, and I think we've definitely touched on this a few times throughout this call. But I think it's just understanding what your goals are, right? What is it you want to achieve, and what is it you're hoping to become with the partnership? And again, you'll enter into strategic partnerships. Most of the time, you're doing it. You're trying to be reactive to an opportunity that's come across your way. I found in my experience, very seldom am I able just to sit down and say, okay, well, what partnerships can I go out and create, and relationships can I build? I'm usually doing that out of a necessity or an opportunity, and you have to move quickly. And that's part of the game, I guess, or the demand with business, is your ability to move quickly and enter into these type of partnerships. But absolutely, let's make certain, and it's a good reminder for myself, that we're taking the time necessary to understand the goals of both parties.
So Ryan, is that part of your intention in the title of this webinar, strategic partnership, meaning as opposed to some other kind of partnership that you're in strategic ones, you're more deliberative and take your time to decide.
That's exactly right. And again, within business, and Rich, I'm sure within your project and what you're putting together, I'm sure there will be different types of partnerships that you'll have to form and create. And for me, from a strategic partnership, I think it's one that I'm definitely viewing and taking on as this is something that I need to put the necessary time in to make sure that it is truly strategic, right? And what the benefit is to all parties.
Yeah, because right now I'm in the middle of some projects, and so I'll have partnerships, subcontractors that are project based, but may or may not turn out to be actual strategic partners beyond one or two projects. Yeah.
Yep. Really good way to define that, right? On that end, it's very contractual. Hey, I'm contracting you to do these few things. That's pretty straightforward, but you're absolutely right in knowing that they may not become a true strategic partner. Their role may just stay to that very contractual, contractor, subcontractor, however you're working. So the next one here, this is a quote by Michael Jordan, and it says, "Talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence win championships." So I think especially in these, strategic partnerships, I think when everybody is able to check the egos at the door, as they say, and understand everyone's role. You talk about, being from Utah and understanding, the 96, 97 seasons. I mean, in my childhood, that was a big deal, right? We were hopeful to to be champions, and the Bulls, beat us out. And I've been able to see some of these documentaries that they've put on and have talked about it. Michael Jordan had a role on that team. And, without his teammates, although some may believe he could have done it on his own, we all know the reality of that it wouldn't have been possible. But he had a very distinct role on his team, as did the others. So I think that's what builds really good teams and really successful partnerships, is understanding and letting people shine. Some people are the leader, right? Some people are going to be the guy that's, you're going in and you're pitching and you're trying to get, a $10 million investment, put the guy that's the performer at the front of the line, right? Let them, wind them up and let them go, right? If you're the guy that, Wizard of Oz behind the scenes, making the puppets go back and forth, support them, be there, put a smile on your face, stay engaged in the conversation, but just, I think, understand your lane and your role within that team is so important. And I found even in my experience, when we do these things and we want to do it all, and we believe that we're going to do it the best, that's where you start to ask yourself, well, why did I even enter into this partnership? And then, quickly, as we're, wrapping up on time here, is just understand, like anything, you have to nurture the relationship. You have to work at it, right? Communication is key. Setting expectations early, we've talked about that, right? Having ways to, whether it is, for me, it's very project oriented with our partnerships, taking the time after each project to sit down and say, okay, what worked and what didn't work. And we would benefit greatly from incorporating that practice into our business. And those are the things that we tend to overlook, and we make excuse, we're just too busy to do it, right? But I think taking that and saying, hey, time out, let's get something on the calendar. We just wrap this project up. Let's talk about it. The last couple slides, this one here is don't assume, right? Get it in writing, like we've talked about. Some things I've always heard the term, well, I just assumed that was included in it. I just assumed you understood that. And for me, and especially in our business, assumptions are dangerous. And I think, again, assumptions in anything, in any type of a relationship, are dangerous. So make sure that there's no assumptions being made or anyone speculating on what the way things should be or shouldn't be. With that, gentlemen, I really do appreciate you, joining. I appreciate you being involved and participating. are there any questions, any insights, any perspective that either of you would like to share with the group before we conclude?
Ryan, you mind sharing your slides? I wasn't able to see them.
Yep, absolutely. I will email those over to you here shortly.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you, Rich. Elias, do you have any questions?
No,
Comments?
I really appreciate all the points you covered, and it's essential. I mean, it's taking that time to strategize properly and doing your due diligence. It is critical, because a bad partnership, it could suck the soul out of you, and it could get messy. So it's definitely, and on the other side, a great partnership could just be something really wonderful and really sustain you when maybe at times when you're not at your best. And so I think it's critical. It's one of those things that I think you've hit it right on. You want to make sure those things are dialed in properly. And I really appreciate the number. I've taken a number of notes, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd like to go up to your title real quick, Ryan. How to find? Do you have any? The classic networking, LinkedIn, trade shows, any other methods you found successful in finding great partners?
No, that's a really good question. Some of my best partnerships have come not necessarily from LinkedIn or even trade shows. We're very project based. We're on a lot of construction sites. We're in and out of warehouses. Some of my best partnerships have come from even meetings that I've been involved in, where there's a 15-minute break and I, take the time to lean over and ask the gentleman sitting next to me what he does, and we get to know each other. And so really those have been those moments where you would least expect it. So again, mine is just from at projects, and we come across our cross path and then we develop these partnerships. So, I don't know the different settings you're in, Rich, but those meetings that you're involved in, those are always worthwhile. Make sure you're making the most when you get out of your car and you're walking up to the meeting and there's somebody by you, ask them what they do. And then when you're leaving or on the breaks, I've had really positive outcomes with those type of situations.
One of my most fun sources is webinars like this.
Oh, there you go. Well, I like it. Well, I will certainly send the presentation over to you, Rich, and to you both. And again, thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you both nothing but the best.
Thank you, Ryan. Take care, Elias.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rich.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.